Okay. So as many of you know, we recently had a pretty traumatic health scare with Cameron here in Quito. And we just thought we'd share a few things about what happened and provide, just for educational purposes, some details about what occurred.
So I had high altitude pulmonary edema. We originally thought that it was pneumonia after having food poisoning in the Galapagos, which is common after you have food poisoning, especially
Certain strains, which we weren't sure what you had, but we were treating it like pneumonia.
So then we were just hydrating me and keeping me monitored. I wasn't getting very much sleep.
But he didn't have a fever, right? So that was one of our key signs that we were waiting for, and just making sure he could breathe. A couple of days into the illness, I directed him to take a nap and try laying on his stomach because I read that that could help loosen your lungs. And when I went to check on him about 45 minutes in, his ears were bright purple and his fingernails and toenails were dark blue. And it was apparent to us immediately that he needed medical care.
So we took him to the hospital, and when we got there, Katie ran into the emergency room with him. He couldn't really walk unassisted at the time, and she quickly responded in a text message, because I was trying to find a place to park the car, that his blood oxygen saturation level was down to 57 when they monitored it. And if you remember, during COVID, anybody getting levels down into the 80s were basically brought to the ER immediately, and in the low 80s or high 70s were put on ventilators. And so he was really, really low. It was pretty scary, but they acted quickly at the ER. Within about 15 minutes, Katie reported that he had an IV, and they were taking it seriously. And they were considering at that point already admitting him into the intensive care unit.
They did that pretty shortly after some of the stressors that we experienced within that hour or so when they started making decisions was that they didn't allow Brandon to come inside. He does speak more Spanish than I do. But at that point, I was just invested on keeping going. Wanted to say thank you. We had some friends really step in for us and answer calls and translate and speak to doctors. The Pineros family helped us with that. And then moving forward, when they were traveling, my coworker Roxana and her son Mario also did a lot of translating for us over the phone. And then our friends, the Olsons, have a connection with family back in the States. Susie's dad was in respiratory care in an ICU, and he was consulting with us and helping us make decisions and advocate for ourselves along the way too, which was really important. But one of the big things going from the ER into intensive care and being admitted to the hospital was kind of learning how the money works here in Ecuador. So immediately they had Brandon come in and just give a deposit of $5,000 and kind of sign everything away, prepay, and not sure what was going to happen next.
So they were saying at that time that Cameron would be in the intensive care unit, they thought, for 3 days, and they estimated that the total cost would be $5,000. So we made a payment for that so that they could transfer him from the ER into the ICU. And thankfully from there, things really accelerated, actually, both in terms of his care and his recovery. And so how was that for you, Bud?
It was very interesting being moved from the ER to intensive care. They didn't really give much warning, and it's very hard to understand the instructions they were giving us and telling us what was happening.
Also, they wouldn't let us stay with you, and
Yeah,
they wouldn't let you
so
have a phone.
They wouldn't let me have anything, so I was just sitting in a brightly lit room, well, not speaking anybody else's language, and being hooked up to a bunch of different things. Was very hard to sleep, probably got 2-3 hours that night. And I didn't know when I would be able to see my mom or anybody next. They had said at 11:30 the next day. Luckily, the doctor came in that morning and said that I might be able to leave the ICU by 9 a.m. because I was progressing so well. And then my mom came in around that same time. And then the new doctor came in for her shift at 9 a.m. and moved me out of the ICU around 9:30. So then we got to move to my own individual room, and then from there they moved us again into a room where I had very little monitoring. Only nurses came in 6 to 8 hours. So
Yeah, and we were able to stay with him then at that point. And so we're so grateful. What we learned is that we have a really great community here already in Quito. We had people bringing meals, the staff care, the Pinho family brought us a meal from our school, and then the school started sending us lunches for the next several days.
And also the party is supplying food for the kids and me and Cameron in the hospital too.
Also just tons of people praying, offering to help with the other kids, stepping in for, like we said, translating other things. And then of course our huge network of people back home as the word started to spread, praying for us, sending messages of encouragement, offering to help should the need arise financially, because it was pretty scary knowing we were in a place where we weren't able to use our insurance and having no idea how much intensive care and things cost. And we don't mind saying, right, for educational reasons, that in the end our bill was about $3,000 for 3 days, a short stint in ICU, so it could have been a whole lot worse. We were grateful to get some money back from the money we paid the first day, but of course it's worth it. And we're so thankful that his life was saved.
We're not sure exactly what it was that contributed to Cameron developing high altitude pulmonary edema, but some things that may have played a factor in it included previous years where he's had pneumonia or other respiratory issues during January because of swim season. Our visit to Cotopaxi volcano about 10 days earlier, where we reached the highest altitude was about 16,400 feet. And so pushing that high so quickly after arriving may have contributed. Going to the Galapagos shortly after that, so returning to sea level and just switching between those altitudes rapidly. And then we think that probably the food poisoning that Cameron had the night before we returned to Quito was the condition that made him most susceptible to it, but we don't know for sure. So now he has a higher risk, we believe, in the future, but that's something that he'll have to work out, and he's recovered well and is doing well. His most current x-rays are showing, perfect condition in his lungs, so that's wonderful.
Thank you for all your support and prayers and interest in the situation with Cameron's health here in Quito.